It's Professor Marino here with my helpful Damon Ezra. Say hello, Ezra. Say hello, be cute. To talk a little bit about Philip Pullman's The Golden Compass. Oh, Damon, don't knock over the camera. So he's very helpful and named after an academic. He's named Ezra Stiles after a former president of Yale. I want to put Pullman's The Golden Compass in dialogue with one of his great forerunners, C.S. Lewis, because this novel and the whole trilogy it comes from is very much in dialogue with C.S. Lewis and is in fact conducting an argument with Lewis. C.S. Lewis, famous 20th century popular theologian. I think the Christian term is he's an apologist. He doesn't have a degree in theology. He's an English professor. And fantasy and science fiction writer who is an evangelist for a certain kind of traditionalist Christianity, and specifically a traditional Church of England English theology version of Christianity. He is also, and this is not a coincidence, C.S. Lewis was also a Milton scholar. And these works, his Dark Materials, as you see from the quotation at the beginning, the trilogy takes its title from Milton's Paradise Lost, a work with which Lewis was very concerned and often published and even rewrote part of in a science fiction novel called Paralandra. This is not C.S. Lewis's Oxford. It is a kind of dream of Oxford. It is set in an Oxford that seems to be between the world wars in terms of technology and culture. The religion in The Golden Compass, the version of the church, is a way C.S. Lewis's dream church, where there's actually not a split between Catholicism and Protestantism, where the great Calvinist thinker John Calvin became Pope and abolished the papacy and created something like the establishment church, that maybe Lewis would want in his ideal world. On the other hand, Pullman is not interested in backing an orthodox, traditionalist, organized Christianity identified with the Anglican Church. Far from it. He dislikes, but more importantly, distrusts Lewis's patriarchal, professorial, traditionalist approach to morality and religion. In many ways, this book is, and the trilogy is very much a counterpoint, an anti-C.S. Lewis. Lewis's most famous work of fiction is, of course, the Narnia series, in which children from England living in a tradition, kind of between the wars England, find their way to a magical, enchanted land called Narnia, where they get to be monarchs and where animals talk to them. And in which they play out pretty clear Christian allegories with a lion who's a very clear Jesus figure. If you read the Narnia books and you didn't see it as a Christian allegory, I'm sorry to ruin it. That lion is a very clear Jesus figure. One of the things that this does is create in Lewis a very clear and stark division between good and evil. The good guys and bad guys are not hard to tell apart for very long. You might be occasionally fooled, but evil's gonna out pretty much. Mrs. Coulter, in a way, is a kind of modern update on the evil witch queen in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And if you doubt that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is in play, it is in play in the first and last chapter of this book. This book begins with our child heroine hiding in a wardrobe in a very traditionalist English place, an imaginary Oxford college that has been written into, that Pullman has written into, the genuine Oxford. Hiding in a wardrobe is where Lewis's fantasy series starts. But the thing here, this wardrobe doesn't have a back. It's not a passage to another kind of world. It is a passage, you are stuck in this world and you have to deal with it. The end of the book, the end of this book does do what the beginning of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe does. It takes our child across a boundary into a different world. It is what is called in the trade, if we're going to get very specific about kind of micro genres, the term for this is portal fantasy, where there's a portal by which human beings, especially children often, find their way into magical lands, usually kingdoms. But this is reversed. It is the adult characters who create that portal. The creation of the portal is at least somewhat sinister, is arguably a mistake. Um, and it takes, actually, spoilers, it takes Lyra not to a world that's more magical than her world, but one that actually resembles ours more. If you're trying to cheat on the reading by watching the HBO series, it conflates the first two books of the series together. So if you think Will is in this book, Will is not in this book. What can I tell you? In C.S. Lewis, the good guys and bad guys are very clearly demarcated. There is not a lot of moral ambiguity. In a way, Lewis uses the tools of science fiction and fantasy to remove moral ambiguity, to imagine worlds where moral choices are simpler and clearer than they are in the phenomenal world in which we live. Pullman clearly is not interested in setting his fiction in a world where morality and moral choices are simpler and clearer. He is interested in a world that is as fully morally complex as ours, where, as in the world where we live, people are neither good nor wholly good nor bad, but a real mix. Now, you may feel Mrs. Coulter is very close to fundamentally wicked and evil. Fundamental wickedness, a John Calvin reference. Brit Lit 1 students, you're welcome. But what about Lord Asriel? Look at that first chapter. In our first chapter, the master of Jordan College sets out unsuccessfully to poison Lord Asriel. This seems to be a clear bad guy versus good guy thing. I mean, it's pretty stark. It's an easy commandment, thou shalt not kill. The guy who's doing the poisoning has to be the bad guy. And Pullman will not tell you that poisoning someone is a good thing to do. But the master of Jordan College turns out not to be a villain. The master of Jordan College turns out to be attempting to protect our hero in Lyra, who in turn protects her uncle, Lord Asriel. Is Asriel a good guy or a bad guy? Yes. Asriel is a good guy and a bad guy. He is certainly, it's also the case that, like, the fact that we're in some simpler fantasy, the good guys and bad guys are easily aligned on clear teams, all the good guys over here versus all the bad guys over here. The adults in this world, the morally complicated adults, are sometimes at odds with each other, but that doesn't mean the one being Mrs. Coulter's enemy doesn't make you, who is evil, doesn't make you good. It makes you something. It makes you opposed to Mrs. Coulter most of the time. Lord Asriel is willing to do, in fact, planning to do exactly the same vicious, immoral thing, mutilating a child's soul, that Mrs. Coulter does. Mrs. Coulter is evil because she doesn't want moral complexity. The issue with Dust is the adults in this novel are obsessed with the idea that children becoming adults become morally complicated and hence sinful people, and they're looking for ways to get rid of that moral ambiguity, to prevent the move to a sinful, imperfect, but experienced and wiser experience of life. Mrs. Coulter wants what C.S. Lewis wants. Mrs. Coulter wants to prevent moral complexity in adulthood, to keep people pure and childish, but what she actually childlike, but what she actually does is make everything evil. This is not C.S. Lewis's Oxford.